The plasma bolt impacted the amber shield with the force of a colliding freight train, blooming into a violent flower of superheated violet light. The shockwave rattled the teeth of every highborn alien in the observation gallery. But the barrier didn't crack. It didn't even scratch. Behind the translucent wall of synthesized organic matter, Jacece Thorne adjusted his safety goggles and checked his watch, ignoring the terrified screeching of the ethics committee. Primitive materials, military-grade consequences. Instructor Cracks, a 6-armed cephalon with a superiority complex the size of a dreadnought, slammed a fist onto the podium, his voice amplified to deafening levels. Cadet Thorne, cease this madness immediately. You were conducting unauthorized weapons testing in a judicial chamber. Jace didn't flinch as another round of ballistics hammered his creation, ricocheting harmlessly off the curbed surface. He just smiled, that predatory bearing of teeth humans confused with friendliness. It's not a weapon, sir. It's my final thesis. 72 hours earlier, the atmosphere in the stellar engineering spire had been significantly less explosive, though the tension was just as palpable. Jay stood at his workstation, the lone human underdog in a sea of silicon-based lifeforms and hive-mind prodigies. The air in the grand laboratory hummed with the high-pitched whine of laser arrays and the smell of ozone. The assignment for the midterm metallurgy exam was deceptive in its simplicity. Forge a blade capable of severing a standard industrial polymer block. The constraint? Candidates could only use materials scavenged from the Academy's waste disposal sector. No refined alloys. No plasma cutters. Cracks had sneered when he handed Jace the datapad. Try not to hurt yourself, mammal. Engineering requires precision, not just opposable thumbs. Jace read the syllabus. Then he read it again. Critical reading was a survival trait on Earth, but out here it was an art form. The text explicitly banned processed metals and energy-based fabrication. It said absolutely nothing about biology. Humans treat the laws of physics as mere suggestions, but they treat rules like puzzles waiting to be solved. Jace grabbed his respirator and headed not for the scrap metal heaps, but for the bio-waste reclamation tanks. While his classmates were sweating over primitive iron forges, trying to beat scrap metal into shape with rocks, Jace was engaging in some aggressive chemistry. He had scraped 5 pounds of discarded insectoid molds from the tank's pure, unrefined kitten. Nature often solves engineering problems better than synthetic manufacturing. And the tensile strength of the local hive beetles was legendary. Back at his station, Jacece worked with a blur of motion that unnerved his neighbors. He wasn't hammering, he was cooking. He dissolved the kitten in a solvent distilled from cleaning fluids, creating a thick, pungent sludge. The smell was sharp, like vinegar and lightning. He poured the mixture into a mold, layering it with fibrous plant matter for flexibility. This was malicious compliance at its finest. They wanted a blade made of trash. He was giving them a hyper-evolved composite. Sleep is for species that can't weaponize their homework, Jace muttered, eyes stinging from the fumes as he applied the catalyst. The reaction was instantaneous. The sludge hissed, flashing from a dull gray to a brilliant crystal in amber. Heat radiated from the mold, shimmering in the air. This wasn't just crafting, it was weaponized creativity. He wasn't forging metal. He was guiding a chemical polymerization that evolution had taken millions of years to perfect, condensing it into 20 minutes of dangerous science. He popped the mold. The blade that fell out wasn't steel. It was a translucent golden scimitar that seemed to capture the overhead lights within its core. It was light, almost weightless, yet rigid enough to stop a pulse rifle. Cracks approached the station, his multiple eyes narrowing as he looked at the golden object. Time is up, Thorne. Present your stick. Jace picked up the kitten blade. He didn't swing it hard. He simply let the edge rest against the industrial polymer testing block and applied pressure. The blade didn't crunch. It didn't grind. It passed through the reinforced polymer block with a terrifying whispering hiss. The top half of the heavy industrial cube slid slowly, inevitably, to the floor, hitting the deck plates with a heavy thud. The cut surface was mirror smooth, polished on a molecular level. Silence swept through the workshop. It was the heavy, stunned quiet of a room full of geniuses, realizing they had been outsmarted by a primate. Cracks stared at the severed block, then at the golden kitten scimitar in Jace's hand. He extended a scanner, his many limbs twitching in agitation. The device chirped, expecting to find illegal plasma emitters or monofilament wires. It found nothing but carbon, calcium, and hardened protein. It is organic, Cracks whispered, the translator collar around his neck struggling to convey his bewilderment. Biomimicry, Jace corrected, wiping a smudge of polymer dust from the blade. Beetles have been building armor that deflects kinetic energy for eons. I just rearranged the molecular furniture. Engineering isn't always about building new things. Sometimes it's about asking nature for the blueprints. That incident was what dragged Jace before the ethics tribunal 3 days later. The administration argued that bringing unregulated biological agents into a sterile environment constituted a Class 4 hazard. Jacece argued that he was merely being resourceful. To settle the dispute and prove the safety of his methods, he had proposed a live-fire demonstration, which brought them back to the present inside the tribunal chamber, where the smoke from the plasma bombardment was finally clearing. Jace lowered the amber transparency of his shield. The surface was hot to the touch, humming with absorbed energy, but completely intact. He had synthesized the bioresin bulkwork using the same principles as the sword, but this time mimicking the impact dispersal layering of deep-sea crustacean shells. He had effectively grown a riot shield in a petri dish. As you can see, Jace called out, his voice echoing in the large chamber. The kinetic transfer was nullified. The loophole in the safety regulation states that energy shields are banned during finals due to power draw concerns. This is not an energy shield. It is a solidified chemical reaction. 0 power draw. Maximum efficiency. The head of the tribunal, a floating cerebral cortex in a glass jar, flashed lights of resignation. The logic was sound. The application was flawless. The audacity was distinctly human. Crax stood by the control panel, looking down at the syllabus in his hand. He looked at Jace, then at the indestructible piece of amber plastic that had just shrugged off enough firepower to level a small outpost. The instructor realized that if he failed the human, Jace would likely return next semester with something even more terrifying. Perhaps weaponized pollen or an acid-spitting backpack. Pass, Crax grunted, the word heavy with reluctance. Top honors. Now deactivate that abomination before I have security vaporize it. Jace grinned, tapping the side of his shield. Actually, sir, it's biodegradable. It'll dissolve into harmless water in about 4 minutes. As the tribunal descended into chaos to evacuate the soon-to-be wet chamber, Jace packed his bag. He had proven his point. In a galaxy obsessed with lasers and chrome, the most dangerous thing in the room was a human who understood that the oldest solutions were often the deadliest. Malicious compliance was indeed a superpower, and Jace had just flown to the top of the class. Later that evening, the entire engineering department received an urgent notification. The syllabus for the final exam had been updated with a new flashing red addendum. No wimpy components. Biology only. Jace slept soundly that night. He was already researching the tensile strength of spider silk for next semester. Please follow my channel for more videos. One click from you can change my life.